Hello, in this video we will be talking about how to win more defense. So the idea for winning defense is going to be a method that we call stalling. Now what stalling is when you're in combat with someone, the goal is typically to bring their life down to 0 in order to win the fight. When you're attacking, you try to do as much damage as possible, and when you're defending, you try to do as much damage as possible. Now stalling kind of turns that around because the attacker actually only has 25 turns. After those 25 turns, if no one is defeated, then the defender wins, and it's called a stalemate. So stalling is a series of tactics and plans in order to extend the time that the attacker has to take in order to win. So stalling is really good for defense, and the first thing we're going to talk about in relation to defense is the Cattle Prod. So if we go to our items, and I am going to have to, oh no, I got busted. Alright, so we'll go to our items here and we'll see that I have a Cattle Prod right here. If I look in my melee, I can see that it has shock, and what shock is it causes the opponent to miss their next turn. Now since there's 25 turns in attack, this isn't very helpful to attack with unless you're group attacking, but that's a topic for another time. If you're defending, this will cause the attacker to miss their turn. If you can cause them to miss 25 turns, then you win through the stalemate. So stalling and using this shock effect is really beneficial. If we look at the Cattle Prod, we see it has no damage. It's decent accuracy. That's pretty good accuracy. Damage is nothing. It's less than your fists. It's less than I think it's less than the rusty sword. It might be even less than a pillow if we look real quick. Where is our pillows? Yeah, it's about the same damage as a pillow, a little less. So that's kind of the concept behind the Cattle Prod. We're just going to use this shock effect. We do need the accuracy to actually hit with it. Damage doesn't matter. We're not trying to kill them, we're just trying to stall them out. So make sure you get a Cattle Prod with a decent shock. They start at 75%, but they can go up to about 90%, and they get really expensive really quick. I wrote some notes here. I started seeing 78% at 100k, 79% at 250k, 80%. There's a few cheaper, but mostly at 1 mil. 81%. There's a few cheaper, but mostly at 2 mil. 82%. There was very, very few, but most of them were at 4.5 mil. So that's, you can see how the price kind of explodes. Past that, it's going to get into tens of mils and hundreds of mils, and then even the billions for the high-end ones. This shock is the chance that the stun happens, so it's very valuable. And we're going to do a little bit of a demonstration. My wife here is running a Cattle Prod, and she has her defense settings similar to mine, so we'll talk about that in a second. But I'm 9 times the stats of her. If you've been playing Torn for a while, you know anyone with 9 times your stat should destroy you instantly. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm actually just going to equip a pillow, and then we will attack her and show how her stuns will stall me out. So ignore the fact that I'm not doing damage right now for the sake of this example. The Cattle Prod and this stalling method is going to help you win more defense, but it's not going to make you immortal. So someone with 9 times your stats is still going to beat you 90% or 99% of the time, I mean. So we will look at that, but real quick, let's turn around and talk about the defense settings as I mentioned before. So if we go to our settings up here in the top right, and we look right here in attack settings, this is our defend preference. This is how much it wants to use each item. So what it does is it takes the sum of these numbers, and it's basically a lottery where it'll randomly pick something. So set your primary and secondary to 1, so if you get disarmed you can still attack, and then set your melee to 100, and then your temporaries, it depends on what temporary you're using. If you want to have tear gases on defense, put this at like 30 or something like that. If you don't really have a temporary that you want to use for your defense, put it down to like 3, 5, somewhere in there. This is how to set up your defense settings for this stalling defend method. So we are going to go ahead and go to her profile, and she is okay, so we're going to go ahead and attack her. Keep in mind I am just going to use this pillow. She's at 1 bill, I'm at 9.1, 9.2 billion, so the stat difference is very significant. This demonstration is just going to show her cattle prod and how many times she can stall me out. So we're going to go ahead and start it. So I'll go ahead, and since I'm the attacker, I get to pick each turn. We can see up here we're at 0 out of 25 and we have 5 minutes. Stalling can either waste the timer, in which case the attacker does lose and go to the hospital, or we can stall out the number of turns, which is what this method with the cattle prod is going to do. So we will just go ahead and hit with our pillow. She throws a tear gas. This reduces my dexterity. This increases her chance to hit me. Because of the stat difference, you have to land the hit and it has to do some amount of damage. So we can see here that I was able to hit her, and she hit me with her cattle prod for 4 damage. That's enough to trigger the stun, but she has an 80% and she didn't get lucky there. So we're going to attack her again. She only did 3 damage to me, but it was enough to shock me. So now I miss my next turn. If we look up here, it's 3. And we can click the pillow, and I did not get a turn, but she hit me again, and she shocked me again. So I was able to attack at the second turn. I missed my third turn. Here's the fourth. I miss it as well. She did hit, but her cattle prod didn't stun, so we'll just click. Here's another stun. So I missed this turn. I missed this turn. We can see it down here too, stunned. Now I get another turn. Now I'm stunned again, so we'll go 1. I was able to hit right there. So I've gotten about 5 out of the 11 hits so far, so you can see about I can only do about half the attacks I normally would do. Here I'm stunned again, so I'll miss this next turn. 1, 2, now I get to hit again. So that was maybe my 6th hit, and now I'm stunned again. Stunned again. It's maybe my 7th hit, and I'm stunned, stunned. 3 stuns in a row. Now I get to hit again. I've almost missed out. That was my 8th hit right there. And now stun, stun, stun until I lose. So I stalemate to her. Now keep in mind I was just using the pillow, so I didn't do the damage because of my stat difference to her. But here you can see I only got about 8 of my 25 turns. So I want you to think about how many fights have you participated in where it took more than 8 turns, because suddenly the attacker has now lost in that amount of time. So I hope you're picking up how strong this cattle prod defense method is. This stalling is extremely good. Now, since it was a stalemate and not a loss, I don't go to the hospital or anything, but I do lose my energy. So it's a waste of energy for me to do that. I wouldn't want to attack her again unless I could be sure I could beat her. That's the deterrence of stall methods. Now, real quick, we could look at another weapon effect that is useful for this, and that would be the Disarm Bonus. It was just recently buffed, so the prices are a little crazy right now, but what Disarm does is if you land a hand or arm hit, the weapon they're using is disabled. So this can remove the option for them to be using weapons, and we can see these starter ones are relatively cheap with decent disarm. We scroll down here, we can see insane amounts, 11 and 6 and 10 right here. These are really expensive, but combining that with a cattle prod, you can really stall out some people. But I think that covers it for today. We've talked about cattle prods, their prices, the stun effect. We did a demonstration showing stalling with the cattle prod. We discussed tear gas a little bit and how it helped her hit. And then we showed you disarm, which is a great companion for stalling. Now, this isn't all of the stalling methods in the game. This is the very beginner starter one. If you're a new player, just grab a cheap one. If you're starting a faction or something, maybe try to buy like these 80% or so, like 10 to 20 of them for your members. So as soon as they join the faction, they can. The base percent is 75%, and those are like 10k. Realistically, like you can sell one loss and get a 79%. Every percentage point is going to be that much more helpful. You saw she did miss quite a few stun opportunities, and that adds up. Now, one thing I'd like to state before we close out here is that since we're using the cattle prod to do the hit to stall the opponent, unlike other stalling methods which may rely on a defensive stat like defense or dexterity to use, this beginner stalling method only requires you to have the strength to actually do any amount of damage, even 1 to 3 damage, as well as the speed to actually hit them. So this method is really good for Baldur's ratio. We talk about stat builds in another video, and I'll put it either at the end of the video or the little card up top. I'll definitely put it in the description. But if you're looking for a stat build after you get to your heavyweight gems, think about Baldur's and just run a cattle prod stall. It's not great, but it is good, and it's good enough for you to stall people with similar stats to yourself. We can see a one build person was able to stall me to only be able to have 8 turns. Think about people kind of close to your stats then, you know. So the fact that you can eliminate a stat and still stall is really, really good. But that's all I want to say about that. I would urge people to get better cattle prods. I've started listing them. I'm actually farming them through the slaughterhouse, and I'm starting to regret that. I don't recommend it yet. We'll see how it goes long term. But I did pick some up, sell some, list some, try to do it at prices that were kind of stable and comparable. Some I bought cheaper and I'm selling for higher. Some I bought kind of the same price and listed. It's just kind of creating an option for you depending on what your prices are and all that. Trying to make this cattle prod thing make sense to more people, and these stalling methods make sense to more people. One last thing, cattle prods are also good for group attacks. We'll talk about that. I think we've discussed that before actually, but we'll talk about stun and other weapon effects in more detail at some point. But I do want you to be aware that this cattle prod is good for loadouts, for assist loadouts, and for your being attacked. So if you're not doing attacks where you need a specific melee, just having a cattle prod equipped is very useful. And we can see real quick right here in my set right here that my assisting does have a cattle prod, and then I have debuff weapons on it and a tear gas to help the other person hit. So that's kind of the strategy I use. My default also keeps the cattle prod on unless I need something else for it, which oftentimes you do when you're attacking because you have to come up with solutions and counters for this. But anyways, I think that's it for me for now. We discussed the cattle prod in great detail. We discussed stunning. We discussed what stalling means. We did a demonstration showing the stun effect. We talked about disarm a little bit, and we showed defense settings. So all in all, this should be a pretty good beginner's guide to winning more defense. Hopefully this was edifying to you. Hopefully this was beneficial. I would like to ask you what other defense strategies you have employed. Whether you have done things like front-loaded damage where you just throw an HEG and use Assassinate or something like that, or what kind of defense strategies you've seen in the higher-end Delta sets, Sentinel and Vanguard sets, those sorts of things. I am interested to see how people handle being attacked. But that's it for me. You have a good one. Catch you in the next one.